Welcome to Aurora Connects. This is episode 7 for May 8th, 2020, Art and Activism. I am Aurora Theater Associate Artistic Director Dawn Monique Williams. And as always, I'm here with co-host Josh. How's it going, Josh? Josh appears to be a little bit frozen. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that. But, Josh crashed. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to roll right into my weekly quote, and our fancy pants production manager, Amanda, will let me know if I need to stop at some point. So this week's play quote comes from Sweat by Lynn Notting.
Oh.
I'm hearing feedback. I think we have Josh back, so I stop.
I think I'm here now. Am I here? Hello.
You are here, but I can hear me from 2 minutes ago. Great.
All right, we're gonna pause for a moment here and get this back. Please bear with us as we get this worked out.
Collaborations across time and space are complicated.
Yeah, that's right. All right, I think we might be good now. All right, we're gonna start this again. Dawn, you want to take it away?
Welcome to Aurora Connects. This is episode 7 for May 8th, 2020, Art and Activism. I am Aurora Theater Company Associate Artistic Director, Dawn Monique Williams. And as always, joined by our Artistic Director, Josh Costello. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
I'm well, Dawn. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Before we ran into a technical glitch, I was going to roll right into the quote for this week, so I'm going to do that. This quote is from Sweat by Lynn Notting. And suddenly you stood up, and for like a second, you looked like another man, bigger, like a transformer. And when you spoke, everyone got real calm and began nodding. You said, we will not continue to bare our backs for them to strike us down.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I think we may have had an echo, but I think it's gone now. What made you choose that quote this week, Dawn?
Well, I felt like that quote sort of bridged the gap between last week and this week. Last week, we bumped into the subject of organizing and unions organizing. And this week, we're going to talk about art and activism. And I know that Lynn sort of wrote this play from her activist spirit. And there's, different dialogue that happens in the play around how people should respond in sort of crisis situations. So that's why I chose this.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. So if people want to donate to Aurora Theater Company, we are accepting donations. As always, you can go to auroratheater.org and click on the donate button at the top right.
Great. And if people have comments or suggestions while they watch along, please feel free to comment on Facebook or in the YouTube chat. Also, please go ahead and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn your bell notifications on so you'll get that weekly alert when we go live. If you rather email us, please do so at connects@auroratheater.org. That's CONNECTS@auroratheater.org. We are welcome to your feedback, suggestions of quotes, people you'd love to see on the show, and things of that nature.
And if you are a podcast listener, this is available as a podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So please subscribe to us there and leave a review.
Great. I'm going to go right ahead and introduce our guests for this week. This week we are joined by theater makers, art activists, Rondon Davis and Claudia Alick. Both who I've had the pleasure to see at work and collaborate with at my time at Aurora, and certainly with Claudia and beyond. So welcome, friends. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hello, so good to be here.
We'd love to just start, real simple and have you share just a little bit about your backgrounds and your previous work with Aurora. Claudia, why don't we start with you first?
Oh, all right then. Oh gosh. Well, I've been doing this for a minute, so I'm not sure exactly how much background you would like to have. So I will say that I am a theater maker. I have a national practice. My company is called Calling Up Justice. It's a transmedia social justice company, producing performances of justice online, on stage, and in real life. Aurora Theater contacted me because they had an in real life performance of justice that they wanted to do a dramaturgical assessment of, and also find some ways to do some devising to create a new performance. And that was specifically about the performance of their house staff with their audiences. And we did some gorgeous, beautiful work. And then it was so much fun that they invited me back. And then we did some more fun devising work. And the result of that was, I'm hoping, deeper, better practice for the theater, but also I left with a bunch of beautiful materials that we had co-created together, and then I shared them with a bunch of other theaters because my company runs on a radical generosity model. If we make something for you, we're actually making it for everyone because we want the entire world to be a better place. And our last collaboration was a transmedia collaboration doing that exact practice and sharing it via HowlRound.
Yes, we're going to get to that a little bit later to unpack that town hall meeting and that forum and what you've been up to since then. Leigh, please share with us a little bit about your background and the work that you've done with Aurora.
Yeah, I'm Leigh Rondon Davis. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am a theater maker located here in the Bay. There's not a lot to my history. I was a theater kid. I've loved it. I've been very fortunate and privileged in the fact that I've had an amazing family support me through that. So now I get to say that I'm a real life grown-up theater maker. I work for a number of organizations around the Bay, including Ubuntu Theater Project in Oakland, Shotgun Players in Berkeley, and Crowded Fire Theater in San Francisco, as well as like a number of other theaters. I'm a performer and I'm a dramaturg. And I first started working with Aurora as the dramaturg on Exit Strategy by Ike Holter that Josh Costello directed. And it was just a really amazing, wonderful time. And what I really appreciated about that process was that there were moments that were hard, but there were a lot of really great conversations. And I was really impressed by the way that both Josh and Aurora as an organization really tried to evolve and change and learn and listen. And so I was invited back to participate in that town hall to talk about how to make theater audiences and theater spaces more inclusive for folks, as a lot of the work that I do focuses on equity, diversity, and inclusion, specifically in a theater setting, and how to make our spaces more accessible to all types of folks from all walks of life.
So wonderful. I feel like you've both been rather modest, but that's okay. It's only a 40-minute program, so I do understand. Josh, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah. Sorry, my Skype keeps crashing, but I seem to be back now. I'd love to hear what projects you guys might be working on during this interruption, and what artistic or in terms of advocacy or activism, what's getting you going right now.
Yeah. Claudia, if you want to jump in first, go ahead.
Oh gosh, I've got so many things. So I think we might want to do I'll say a few things I'm working on, and then we'll pass off to you. Then we can come back to me because it's been a very interesting time. I have a transmedia company, and I started it specifically because I was trying to create a practice for what I thought the field was going to need. I did not anticipate a larger than life global event. Fast forwarding that process so quickly, so my workload has exponentially grown. The need for not only transmedia producing models as well as social justice activist producing, both of those needs have grown really high. So I'm co-president of the board of the Network of Ensemble Theaters. So we've been doing a lot of support work with our constituency, making sure ensembles are getting support funds, as well as ensembles being able to communicate with each other to build the new work that they're going to be doing. I'm continuing work on the Connector app, and we've done some beautiful changes to it so it can be more responsive to artists who are working remotely and from a distance, as well as those who will be able to tour and work together physically in the future. I've been doing a lot of leadership work with Unsettling Dramaturgy, a group of Crip and Indigenous dramaturgs. We had been meeting online because it's an international colloquium. It's mostly Canada and the United States. We've been meeting for about a year. We have a very intense practice, a lot of protocols that are about maximum accessibility, because we have representation from all different disabled communities, as well as a lot of different communities all over physically and geographically. So we've been sharing that practice via HowlRound because we've built ways of connecting that are, I think, more human-based, decolonized, as well as being deeply intentional and accessible. So it's been a joy sharing those praxis sessions there. I'm going to take a pause, hand the microphone to my colleague.
And before we, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask two follow-up questions to that? Because I'm so fascinated by this. Can you share an example of a practice that your group has developed to make this all more accessible or decolonized?
Sure.
And then maybe are any of these practices that you guys are developing through this program being picked up by other more traditional organizations? And what's that process like?
Ah, wow. Okay. So very slowly, I'm trying to answer all of those questions. We decided to share our practice in this very open way through these praxis sessions that were live streamed and also archived via HowlRound. So anyone can go there and watch 9 hours of us doing our thing and learn from that. We created different ways of doing land acknowledgement, and then we modeled those different ways. So I've seen that practice brought into other spaces, sometimes by us, sometimes by people who observed us and then are doing it themselves. We've talked about doing just a basic a digital communications acknowledgement, because the wires that we are using to communicate, they are not neutral. They are going through the ground and they are not shared equitably. So that means while we have the joy and privilege of communicating digitally, not everybody has that privilege. So we've been doing that. Spiderweb Theater crafted a really beautiful digital land acknowledgement that we've been finding super useful. We're continuing to do the access check-in, and the access check-in has become vital for every single meeting practice I've been a part of, because I think that right now I've been part of the disabled community because of my physical body. Now I have a bunch of other people who are joining me in the disabled community because they are being disabled by a lot of other things in the world. And so they're having to do some of those practices. And the practice of simply saying, these are my access needs at the top of the meeting, and also having the practice of it being okay to bring up more needs later on, has been really vital in keeping all of our meeting practices healthy and productive.
Thank you.
I also have a follow-up question, but what we'll do is we'll go to Leigh first, and then we'll wrap back around.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, I can say that, like, a lot of my theater practices, I feel like, have come from Claudia in some way. Like, the number of theaters that I work for that do access check-ins. I attended that praxis unsettling meeting on land acknowledgements, and, like, you know, that started a conversation for some of the organizations that I'm working with of, like, how can we really use a land acknowledgement to uplift the communities that it's supposed to, and really, like, hold our culpability of that. And so shout out to Claudia, because my whole life has been changed by you. But in terms of the things that I am working on right now, I've been doing some Zoom readings for various theater companies. I've done a couple of conversations like this. I'm working with a small theater company right now that I've am a part of with some friends called the Forum Collective on developing a series of pieces and journalism about right now. It's called The Ether. So we're going to be working on rolling that out, and it's going to be looking at different marginalized communities and the way that they are navigating this crisis, this global pandemic right now, and the ways that it's really hard, and also the ways that we find joy. And I'm really excited about diving into that work with some really dear friends and collaborators. I've been doing a lot of silly videos content, which has been really, really great. I've gotten to be out in my yard with my partner a lot, doing really silly stuff. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's both felt like a little bit of a breath for me, where like not every second of every day is planned and scheduled in the normal way that I'm used to. Having to run back and forth across the bay to go to various theater companies and functions. But now I can like sit with myself and work on things around my apartment and work on projects that are meaningful to me. And just spend time with family and friends. My older sister, she is a physical trainer in Pennsylvania, so I got to jump on one of her boot camps today. And so every day is different. Every day is either a little bit hard or really good or a mix of both. But I'm trying to find ways in which to find joy and find gratitude and be present with my loved ones and connect with folks that I've fallen out of touch with and just make it meaningful for myself. So that's kind of the world of Leigh right now.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. And I've been feeling more and more like the digital content creators. Like I'm now obsessed with TikTok, which I was never watching before. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the world, like digital content creators have like such an advantage right now. So which leads me to my follow-up question for you, Claudia, because I certainly followed your digital nomad journey. And so I think I know what you mean by transmedia, but this term might be really new for a lot of people. So we'd love it if you could explicate on what it means to be a transmedia company.
Thank you so much for that invitation. You know, because this field is so new, the term transmedia, I'm using it in a very specific way. It's used in different ways throughout the field. The way I use the term transmedia is narrative and story that is taking place in multiple mediums. And one of those mediums is IRL, in real life meet space, right? So I'm a strong believer that if I want to teach a classroom really well, I want to give them their lesson written down on a piece of paper. I want to tell them the lesson verbally, and I also want to give them an opportunity to embody it in their bodies. Mm-hmm. My producing practice is exactly the same. Mm-hmm. So if I want to be as accessible as possible, and also if I want to have as much reach and connectivity as possible, it's important for me to have pieces of my narrative that live in social media, pieces of the narrative that live perhaps in a written published text, pieces of the narrative that live embodied physically in real life. And in a perfect world, I'm able to produce these moments where all of those worlds are blending together. So the project that brought me to the Bay Area 2 years ago was, oh golly, I'm forgetting the details. It was Eric Cooper's, and he was doing like a 48-hour like durational performance. And I was like, oh, I'll take an hour. And what I'll do, super simple, I will take give me like 30 mixed ability dancers. We'll have them all on stage. Then I'll have 7 artists who are in different states all over the country, and they will use Skype or FaceTime. We used every single medium. Somebody used Zoom, somebody used FaceTime, and they all gave a piece of social justice call and response prompt to the artists on the stage, who then in real time created a performance for the audience who'd been watching the entire thing. It felt like a self-indulgent, wild experiment that I was doing 2 years ago. And now it feels like, oh, this is actually going to be a central piece of my practice now. I know that because of COVID-19, I will be trapped in my home and unable to share physical space safely with people for a while. creating a vaccine, that's usually like a 5-year process. Now, I'm hoping that because of the global nature of this, everybody's going to be cooperative. They're going to let go of the capitalist nonsense that slows that vaccine making process down, and they're going to get it out to us in 12 to 16 months. But the truth is, I'm preparing for the long haul to be trapped in my apartment. So these transmedia producing practices are ones that every single theater is going to need to embrace.
We've certainly been thinking a lot about that. Yep.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Gosh, and just to think how ahead of the curve you've been all this time, Claudia.
And it's not like I was alone. There's other theater companies. So I should share other projects I've been working on. I started a Facebook group, a transmedia producing Facebook group. What am I doing on there? I'm sharing all of the fresh, amazing things people are doing. So like Curbside Theater is doing door-to-door theater. There's an artist that's doing theater by the mail and somehow integrating a theater practice with the post office. There's people who are doing live streamed theater via Zoom. Peter Kuo just did an amazing, brilliant production of a Love and Warcraft by Madri Thinker. It's a brilliant production. It was done by the MFA students, all via Zoom. It's a new age, and I'm not the one that's doing this. Everybody else is. So we're building on practice that already exists and is out there. I've also been holding a Monday morning peer exchange session called Digital and Transmedia Producing in an Age of Pandemic. It's open to anybody, and it's just been a time for artists to come together again in a borderless way. So connections were made in that space. Not only are people sharing their practice and their cool projects, but they're making friends and then collaborating. So a producer in Toronto ended up helping the Women's Theater Festival here in the Bay Area. And it's because they met in the beautiful liminal space of digital land that is everywhere and nowhere all at once.
Wow. I'd love to just throw out a question and then see where it takes us and then what follow-up Josh has. I wonder if there was a specific moment in your life where you knew that an artistic practice was a site for activism.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be that the two can't be separated, or that your evolution was much later. Like if I think of the very first play I ever did, it was actually a Martin Luther King Day play where I was in the 3rd grade and it was like Rosa Parks on the bus. And I wanted to be Rosa Parks. I didn't get cast as Rosa Parks, but I think about that. And I think about the first professional show I ever saw was The Wiz. So my understanding of theater already was a container for Black bodies. And it wasn't until later in life that I realized, actually, no, there's actually some pushback there. So theater was introduced to me as a space that was completely available to me until my teenage years, where I had to process it much differently. And that's when I learned, theater is a site for activism. And I just wonder if either of you have an experience of that, or if it's always been in complete alignment, if activism was a site for art making.
I mean, that definitely, I have a moment that I think of, and I tell this story a lot, but I grew up in New York until I was about 11 when my family moved to the Bay. And during that time in New York, my mom would take me to see Broadway shows. We'd get rush tickets. We would take the standing room only tickets. And, she was really great about exposing me to theater. And I fell in love very early. And I was going to some pretty diverse schools in Brooklyn, and kids of all backgrounds were performing in plays and taking on roles, and you weren't necessarily thinking about race as specifically. And I remember, I think I was about 8, and my parents signed me up for like a summer acting program at a theater school in Long Island, where this is a much more affluent, predominantly white community. And I remember for the showcase, we're supposed to, pick monologues and songs to perform. And I'm an 8-year-old girl. Of course, I'm looking at Annie was the one that I fell in love with. Who doesn't love Annie? And I remember being told, like, you can't play Annie. You don't have red hair. I was like, okay, well, I'll just get a wig. Everybody wears wigs. That's fine. It's theater. And they were like, no, like, you can't play Annie. You're not white. And it was just so like cut and dry. And of course, I joke about that, like fueling me, like the spite and rage of it all, like kind of becoming the trajectory for my theater career. I just did it in spite of all these little girls from Long Island. But that was the moment where I realized, like, oh, there aren't many roles for little Black girls at the time, you know, in the early 90s, that wasn't an animal or, you know, just some non-speaking role in the background thrown in for some color and diversity. And so that kind of really started my path in looking for art that centers, theater that centers, you know, young Black women, folks of marginalized identities. Where can I find opportunities to be a part of or to help amplify or support the stories of folks who weren't necessarily featured in mainstream theater at the time. And now I'm really excited to see such a shift going on in our community, but I'm excited to like be a part of pushing it even further and complicating the stories that we're telling and pushing back against, you know, stereotypes and bias and harmful narratives, and just finding space to celebrate all of the wonderful, diverse folks that are out there making stories, making art.
I love that this journey. You say it started with spite and rage, and yet you are like one of the least rageful. You present as one of the least rageful people that I know, and I love that it's become this joyful act for you.
Yeah, I mean it's great every day that I get to like meet and work with a new playwright and or perform in a show where this is a story that hasn't been told before, or hasn't been told in this way, or we're raising awareness of this, you know, particular issue or lifestyle or background. And, you know, now it feels like a positive thing as opposed to me being like, I'm going to show little Susie, you know. So that's really transformed for me.
Claudia, do you have a moment? Oh, maybe Claudia's frozen.
I think Claudia's frozen. Uh-oh.
That's okay. Well, we'll keep going and see if she's able to rejoin us in a few minutes. Josh, I wonder if there's a moment for you where you realize that art making could be a site for activism.
I mean, there's a few, yeah, for sure. I mean, my beef with theater as it has always been more about age than anything else, and I've always been really passionate about making theater that resonates for younger people, and that dates back to when I was a younger person. And you know, when I started Impact Theater, it was all about, you know, we're going to claim theater for Generation X, which at the time was people in their teens and 20s. It's been a while since that happened, but I'm still really passionate about that. But I also remember, you know, when I was running Impact Theater. And it was, you know, we were, you know, doing auditions in my, you know, living room, and it was very small. And we started having these conversations of like, why are we only getting white people to audition? We want to be more diverse. And the realization sort of, you know, embarrassingly slowly hitting me that like, oh, it's about the content of the work we're doing and about the whole, everything that we're putting out. We're thinking so much about, you know, appealing to young folks and like being authentically speaking to young folks. And yet we're, you know, predominantly, you know, it wasn't an exclusively white organization at the time, but it was, you know, the stories we were telling were not as diverse as perhaps they could have been. And so that really stuck with me and sort of got me, you know, started thinking about what, that every story you tell is political, that every story implies a cause and effect, right? That's what a story is. A story is if this happens, then that will happen. And there's the moral of the story is when you do this, then you get that. And that's always a political message. And so you always want to think about what message are you putting out into the world with whatever story you're choosing to tell. So.
That's great. It does look like we have Claudia back. Hi, Claudia. It says here that you're muted, so feel free to unmute yourself. We're still on the same question, Claudia. If there's a moment for you where the intersection of art and activism became clear or necessary or demanding on your spirit?
Well, it's complicated. I think that the activist nature of my work, the centering of Blackness, the centering of womanness, the centering of disabled identity, all of those have been pieces of my practice from the beginning. But I was also deeply aware of what the United States cultural producing field demanded and wanted, and was completely at peace with doing what needed to be done to succeed within those parameters. And I recall having a moment in undergrad, walking around in Washington D.C. and it was just this deep moment of trying to figure out if I was going to quit being an artist. And if that was a necessary thing to do in order to serve the greater good, to serve people. Because I felt that the musicals that I was being asked to perform in, the performing practices I was being asked to perfect and hone, the text and rhetoric that I was asked to become fluent in, all of them were white dominant, male dominant things that instinctually I was like, this is all cis hetero. I didn't have that language, but I understood that I was being trained and asked to perpetuate things that were not for my people, that were not for me. And I asked myself, well, do I have to quit being an actor? And then I made this radical choice. I remember walking down the street going, you know what? I don't have to make money or be successful. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to make the art that I think needs to be made. I'm going to define success for myself. And thank goodness I made that choice. It served me well my entire career.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Was that when you started Spoken Word?
Oh, no, actually, that was when I ended up taking over a program at the university. I started Spoken Word Productions. Oh, gosh. I was in New York City, had a very negative experience of being part of a very exploitative performance art troupe that basically didn't pay their actors, asked us to work wild hours. And of course, the work was incredibly white and male. And I left that and I was like, you know how I'm going to get revenge? I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to pay my actors really equitably. That'll get them. Yes, the best revenge is you do something really positive for yourself and others. And that's how Spoken Word Productions was begun. The project that I'm working on right now, that I'm the most passionate about, is called We Charge Genocide TV. And it is a project that is transmedia, and it is in conversation with the fact that African-American populations, indigenous populations have been experiencing the conditions that are as defined by the UN of genocide for a very long time. It never stopped. The original We Charge Genocide document, created by the very handsome communist Paul Robeson, that was in 1951. 1951. We're in 2020 today. We've got increasing anti-Asian violence, anti-Semitic violence, and so we're going to be throwing a thing on Juneteenth that is a huge artistic indictment of the United States.
Wow. How thrilling. Oh, Josh, I know that you wanted to use this time together as an opportunity to also kind of just check in about what's been going on since the town hall. Why don't I turn it over to you to lead us in that conversation?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm curious to hear what Leigh and Claudia have to say, but we did this town hall called Welcome to Our Space in partnership with Calling Up Justice, Claudia's organization, and the Shotgun Players, and Z Space and Theater Bay Area, where Claudia and Leigh and also Sean San Jose were on our stage and led a conversation about what it is that makes people feel welcome in a theater space, and why is it that so many people have experiences of being made to feel unwelcome. And that happens sometimes at Aurora, which has been a real wake-up call for a lot of people, and also in spaces, public spaces, other theaters, public spaces around the country. And it's particularly, the issue that had been brought to my attention as artistic director and brought to Aurora's attention more generally is that people, especially young people of color, were experiencing interactions with other folks, often other audience members, that made them feel unwelcome in our space. And a big part of what I want to do with Aurora Theater Company is to, make more people feel welcome here. And so we had a really, really fascinating conversation about that went far beyond those particular incidents, but about what are the barriers to people feeling welcome in a space? What can an organization do to make people feel welcome in our space? Or what do organizations do to fail to make people feel welcome in our space? And part of it was aimed at educating our audience about microaggressions and what they are and why they're real and why they're an issue. And part of it was just a conversation. So I'd love to hear sort of what your guys' impression was of that town hall and any thoughts you might have had since then. Leigh, do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I can jump in. I joke about this a lot too, but I was just gearing up kind of for the worst for this town hall. I know sometimes a lot of these conversations can go a little off the rails, and I had experienced that at a number of theaters, not just Aurora. And part of it was, I think my inclusion in the conversation came from an incident that I did have while being the dramaturg on Exit Strategy with an older white audience member that made me feel really unwelcome. And it was super confusing because I was like, I am being paid to be here. I feel like I am supposed to be here. Yet, however, I still feel very unwelcome or not safe right now. And I don't know how to rectify those things or make sense of that. And so I was really appreciative for the opportunity to speak on this panel and share my thoughts and also be a part of a force for change, a positive change in our community. And I was just so impressed by the breadth of the conversation in that we were talking about what organizations can do in terms of being more inclusive or what they're doing that actually is probably making people feel less welcome in their spaces, and what audience members specifically could do. And there are a lot of people coming at it from very different perspectives and beliefs about what theater is. And at the end of the day, I felt like the summary of the conversation was just mind your business, enjoy the theater, communicate with each other, and just be empathetic. Those are all of the things.
It's not rocket science.
Simple and easy. Yeah. And also knowing that none of us are perfect, I really appreciated the focus on the conversation that we all commit microaggressive behaviors. This is not just a thing that older people do or just white people do. We're all a part of that. We're all learning a lot of biases and stereotypes and things that were taught to us by what our society is right now. So as long as we're making steps to be better people, to unpack those and unlearn those things, that's a great place to start. And that's okay if you're not doing it 100% right all of the time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One thing I wonder, there may be some of our audience members who are listening or watching who haven't really become familiar with this term microaggressions. So I want to take a stab at defining it, and then maybe you can tell me if I've got it right. So my understanding about a microaggression is that it is a very subtle, often, and everyday sort of slight that on its own may be meaningless, may be unintentional, or may not be. But that may not even be noticed until later when you think about, was that person being mean to me? Was that person deliberately trying to make me feel bad? But that collectively, that when they happen over and over and over again, have a really detrimental effect on the people who experience them. And people of marginalized communities tend to experience microaggressions out of all proportion. And this is, everyone that I have talked to seems to confirm that this is something that happens quite often. Am I in the right ballpark for what a microaggression is and why it's significant and important to talk about?
Very good.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And so a particular example. Do you want to talk about more about your example of what happened in the audience at Aurora?
Sure. Yeah, I can. So I was there for one of the preview performances, and as those of you that saw Exit Strategy may know, it's a very funny play, and I was familiar with it. I think the cast was phenomenal, so every time I watched it, I would crack up and laugh out loud like one does when things are funny.
Yeah.
And there was a woman sitting in front of me, and initially she just like turned around and glared and said something I didn't understand. And I'm sitting there with my partner, who was, you know, the other young person of color in the audience. And so we're like writing it out, we're seeing, I don't know what her issue is. And then I laugh again. It's funny. The play makes me laugh. And she kind of like grumbles to herself while gathering her things and switches to a seat in the front row, like she's laughing too, blah, 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 blah. And it was not only embarrassing, like I just wanted to sink into the ground and be swallowed whole by the earth, but it really pushed against the fact that, like, wait, why don't I feel like I belong here? Or why don't I feel welcome here when it's my job to be here and I was asked to be here by the organization? And so, yeah, so it was like hard to kind of address and then like jump into notes after the play and like process all of my feelings around it. And I feel like it was such an easy thing to have fixed. Like she could have turned around and politely whispered, you know, like, oh, you're laughing a little loud behind me. Like, is there anything that we can do together to fix this? Because I would have been totally down had I known what the issue was. But she got up and she switched seats in the middle of a scene to sit in the front row next to another older white woman who was laughing just as loud and also talking during the play, which I still think is hilarious. And it just showed me what was okay and what wasn't. If it was coming from another older white patron for this particular woman, all good. We'll let it slide. But if it was coming from me, because I don't belong there, obviously, you know, then it's an issue. And so, and that's not the first time things like that have happened to me at theaters. It's definitely not the first time that's happened to any person of color or any person of a marginalized identity, like has experienced at the theater. But I really appreciate that, you know, you all were so receptive to kind of like hear like, hey, this was a really crappy thing that happened at your theater, and then took steps to fix it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that again, Leigh. I really appreciate your willingness to talk about it. And I think it's the kind of thing, you know, I talked to some folks about it, and their initial response is, oh, but that's nothing, you know, oh, it's, you know, what they were just having a, you know, blah, 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 whatever it is. And what I say to them is like, yes, but any one incident like that, sure, there's an explanation for it, but it happens so often to so many people and disproportionately to people of color. And so it's like, this is a thing that needs to be addressed. And that's why we have, you know, Aurora is one of the first things that Claudia and Aurora worked with is putting together this commitment to the community that we posted in our lobby and in our programs and on our website that talks about the expectations for how people behave with each other in our space. Claudia, are you back? Oh,
yes, I am back.
Excellent.
I now speaking to you via a separate device.
Excellent.
I've given up on the laptop and I'm now speaking to you through the iPad. Yay, technology. But I rejoined as you were recapping what a microaggression was. Beautiful. I've been thinking really deeply about the exercise of harming someone, hearing that you've harmed someone, and then telling them to their face, I didn't harm you, you're not harmed. And having experienced that all the time over and over again, and then seeing people, I've just heard this story from a lot of colleagues, and also I've seen it play out where people are not respecting social distancing. And I go, that's the exact same dynamic. It's the same performance taking place of the person saying, for my health and safety, I need you to stay away from me. And the other person saying, well, I don't think that's a need for anyone. Therefore, I'm just going to violate that. You know, one of the metaphors they use for describing microaggressions is bee stings, where it's like, oh, if you get one bee sting, ow, that hurts, or mosquito bites. You get one, ow, that hurts. But if you're getting hundreds of them on your arm over and over again, not only is it going to be a gigantic problem, but you're going to get an allergic reaction and respond really strongly to just one. Right. I feel like that metaphor is at play all throughout the United States right now.
Yeah. There's so much we could delve into here, but we're running a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I also just go, you as a theater are working on how can we have a better performance between each other as human beings inside our theater space. That's going to be vital and important always, forever into the future, as well as in our digital spaces. And I think right now folks are having the complicated recognition that they haven't been practicing, I guess, the best performative scores for sharing space on the street, for sharing space in the grocery store. I think they might all need to maybe have a look at your code of conduct.
I hope so. It's on our website for anyone who wants to look at it.
Wow. Well, like Josh said, we are running a little close to time here, but I perhaps you each would offer one thing that people or organizations could do right now to make things better for everyone.
Well, that's a really big question,
yes,
but something that I've been thinking about during this pandemic is the accessibility of theater. Like, I think a lot of organizations are working really hard artistically on like how to make their artwork more accessible by what they're choosing to produce or not produce and which stories they're choosing to amplify. Their ticket costs are going down, which I think is great. And we're having amazing donors support our organizations and support these initiatives to just make sure that the cost of the ticket, the art itself, are not barriers to entry. But now sharing, being a part of all of these theater performances and attending these things that are so accessible because you don't have to leave your house. You just need your computer. That saying, like, it's not totally accessible because there are people without these means of technology out there that are being left out of these conversations and these art making moments. But the fact that, my aunt who lives in Illinois right now and hasn't seen me perform since I was a kid can finally tune in to see my work, or that the person that tuned into a Zoom reading that I helped host saying that, as someone with chronic illness and chronic pain, it's really hard to get to the theater. And I love the fact that I can just like take it easy and watch it from my home, or like my, young folks of color out here who are yelling at, we saw Schoolgirls, the production from Berkeley Rep, and like we are having the time of our lives in our houses and like shouting at the screen, calling out our friends, and having this like church moment where I feel totally uninhibited. I feel totally free, and I don't feel like some old person's going to turn around and look at me, or someone's going to judge me for having the experience that I'm having with theater. So I think as we're struggling through this together, and as these times are really hard, I'm hoping that theaters are embracing some of these new technologies and these new forms of art making, and thinking about including them in their future programming and the way they operate as organizations going down the road, because it does mean a lot for a lot of people to just have this new way into theater. So that's what I'll share.
Thank you.
I think the best thing theaters could do to prepare themselves for the future that we need is to talk to their artists and audiences and ask them, what do you want us to be? And let go of everything we were before. We need to imagine big and different, and as awful as this moment is, it's also a gift. In crisis, there is opportunity. We have an opportunity to make something so much better. So I'm just hoping that folks are taking this opportunity to ask explicitly and listen, and then actually follow through.
That's wonderful.
I'm going to jump on that right now and say, I know we have artists and audience members watching right now. And if you have ideas for what you would like Aurora to be and what you would like Aurora to do, write to us, write to me, jcostello@auroratheater.org or connects@auroratheater.org. I really want to hear from you. Seriously, what do you want Aurora to be in this time and going forward? Please, please, please let us know.
And they also could support Aurora's efforts, Josh, by donating.
That's true. They absolutely could. And we are looking for ways to weather the storm and to keep making art and serving our mission as storyteller to the community, even during this interruption. So if you want to help us do those things, you can go to our website, auroratheater.org, and click the donate link at the top right.
Great. So we're going to wind it down. Remember to hit the like and subscribe. Who do we have next week, Josh?
Next week, we have Brittany Fraser and Margot Hall talking about the Aurora Originate and Generate Commission piece called Laveau, which has been in the works for a couple of years. Hopefully is heading towards a presentation sometime soon. But I'm really happy to have Margot and Britt on the show and talking with all of you about their work.
Great. And I want to thank our guests again today, Claudia, Alick, Leigh, Rondon Davis. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a nutritious conversation. I certainly hope that we have you back on in the future and revisit these things. And to our subscribers, to our viewers now, to our long-going patrons, to everybody out there who's watching now or in the future, thanks for staying connected. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.